When we think about strength, we often imagine someone who is unshaken by life's challenges, someone who can stand tall in the face of adversity without so much as flinching. It's a powerful image, one that suggests invincibility, an unwavering shield against life's hardships. But when we turn to the stories of God's strongest women, we see a different kind of strength emerge, one that doesn't simply avoid or deflect suffering, but rather embraces it as an essential part of their spiritual journey. And it's within this paradox, this divine contradiction, that we find one of the most profound truths of faith. Those who are called to be the strongest often bear the heaviest burdens. Now, this idea of strength through suffering may seem counterintuitive at first in a world that celebrates self-reliance, individualism, and the ability to endure without showing weakness. It's hard to reconcile the notion that the strongest women of God would be allowed to endure more pain, more heritage, and more trials than others. But if we dig deeper, we begin to see that suffering is not a sign of God's abandonment. Rather, it is an invitation to deeper intimacy, a call to trust, and an opportunity to be refined like gold in the fire. In fact, many of the women we revere in the Bible face profound suffering. Think of Sarah waiting years for the promise of a child, or Esther, who risked her life to save her people, or even Mary, the mother of Jesus, who bore the pain of watching her son suffer and die. These women were not chosen for their ability to avoid suffering. They were chosen because they were willing to endure it, to grow through it, and to use their pain as a means of bringing glory to God. This doesn't diminish their strength, it amplifies it. Their strength was not born in spite of their suffering, but because of it. Suffering, when viewed through the lens of faith, becomes a refining process. Think about it, we all go through difficult times, but how we respond to those times determines the depth of our strength. It's easy to be strong when everything is going well, but true strength emerges when life tests our limits, when we are forced to confront our vulnerabilities and brokenness. As walking women who are called to walk the path of divine strength are often those who are tested the most, not because they are weak, but because they are capable of growing through the testing. Consider the psychological and philosophical aspects of this idea. In psychological terms, suffering can be seen as a transformative process, a way in which the self evolves and adapts. The trials and tribulations we face are not simply obstacles, they are opportunities for growth, for the expansion of our inner capacities. In this sense, suffering is not an endpoint, but a journey towards self-actualization. When we look at the women who have borne the weight of great trials, whether it's in their personal lives, their families, or their communities, we see that they emerge from these experiences not only with a deeper understanding of themselves, but with a greater capacity to love, to serve, and to lead. Philosophically, suffering can be understood as a tool for creating meaning. Viktor Frankl, the renowned psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, spoke about the importance of finding meaning even in the darkest of circumstances. He argued that those who could find meaning in suffering were far more likely to survive and thrive through it. This is exactly what we see in the lives of God's strongest women. They find meaning in their suffering because they trust that God has a purpose for every trial. Each moment of pain becomes an opportunity to deepen their faith, to expand their understanding of their purpose, and to connect with God in a way that would not be possible if life were easy. At this point, it's essential to address the misconception that strength means never breaking, never being vulnerable. The truth is, the strongest women are often those who have been broken the most. Their strength is not an external facade, but an internal resilience that allows them to rise again and again from the ashes of their trials. They show us that it's not the absence of suffering that makes us strong, it's the way we endure it, the way we allow it to shape and mold us, that determines the depth of our strength. In the end, the strength of God's strongest women is not a result of their ability to avoid hardship. It is a result of their willingness to go through it, to trust in God's greater plan, and to emerge from the process as more refined, keen, more compassionate, and more empowered than ever before. As we reflect on this, I want you to consider this. Are you allowing your suffering to shape you into the woman God has called you to be, or are you resisting it? The strength you're seeking, the strength that will carry you through life's storms, is already within you, waiting to be revealed through the fire. Let's talk about the kind of strength that doesn't make headlines, the kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but is forged in the quiet, in unseen places of suffering. This kind of strength, the deep, unshakable kind, is built, not bestowed. And the process through which it's built is not one of ease, but of pressure. It's not comfort that refines the soul. It's challenge, walking, it's tension, it's pain. God's strongest women are not strong because they were born that way of walking. They are strong because they've been through something that broke them open, something that made them choose day after day to rise when it would have been easier to disappear. We often misunderstand the purpose of suffering. Too many people see it as punishment or misfortune, a sign that God has turned his face away. But that's not how God works with those he intends to use. When God wants to build something solid, something lasting, he doesn't rush the process, and he doesn't use cheap materials. He tests, he shapes, he stretches, he purifies, and yes, often that happens through suffering, as walking. The Greek word dokimazo, which means to test and approve, appears throughout the New Testament in the context of trials. It refers to the process by which metal is tested by fire, how impurities are burned off, and what remains is something stronger, more valuable, more useful. This is what God does in the lives of his strongest women. He allows the fire not to destroy them, but to expose what's already inside them and to bring it into alignment with his purpose. Psychologically speaking, a character is not formed in a vacuum. It's formed through struggle. When a woman faces adversity, real adversity, the kind that shakes the core of her identity, she is forced to confront parts of herself that would otherwise stay hidden. In the field of developmental psychology, we know that the most significant growth happens when a person is stretched beyond their comfort zone. That discomfort triggers a process of adaptation where values, beliefs, and perspectives are reevaluated and strengthened. In this way, suffering is not a detour in the journey of strength, it is the path itself. Think about how resilience is developed. It's not genetic, it's cultivated. A resilient woman isn't one who never falls, she's the one who gets up again and again with deeper wisdom and greater capacity to carry others. That ability to endure, to keep showing up when everything in you wants to give up, that's what real strength looks like. And it doesn't come without a price. And here's where it gets even more profound. God is not merely interested in what you do, he's deeply concerned with who you become. The reason the suffering of strong women is so intense is because the calling on their life is heavy. To carry a deep requires deep character. To lead others into freedom, you have to have walked through chains. To speak healing as walking. You must know what it is to bleed. This is why the enemy attacks the strongest women the hardest, not because of who they are today, but because of who they are becoming. Philosophers like Asave Ren Kierkegaard have wrestled with the idea that suffering is essential to becoming truly human. He argued that despair, walking, when faced honestly, can lead to faith, not superficial belief, but deep, abiding trust in something greater than yourself. Walking, that kind of faith is not built in the pews, it's built in the valleys, it's built in the hospital rooms, the nights of weeping, in the moments of betrayal and silence when God seems far, and yet somehow, as walking, it's in those very moments that something eternal is being forged in the soul, something unshakable. So when you ask, why do I suffer like this? You're not wrong to ask. But maybe the better question is, what is this suffering building in me? Because if you could see what God is doing behind the scenes, if you could see the strength he's shaping in you, you wouldn't ask to skip the process of walking. you'd ask for the grace to endure it. And make no mistake, grace doesn't mean escape. Grace means divine empowerment. It's the ability to walk through the fire and come out refined, not consumed. It's the invisible strength that holds you up when everything else falls apart. God's strongest women are walking miracles, not because they've avoided pain, but because they've allowed that pain to be transformed into purpose. So I'll leave you with this: don't waste your suffering. Let it build something in you that comfort never could, and let it shape you into a woman who not only survives the fire, but carries its light for others to see. If there's one thing that separates those who collapse under suffering from those who are transformed by it, it's this faith, not shallow belief, not religious routine, but deep, grounded, living faith, the kind of faith that becomes your lifeline when every other support is stripped away, the kind of faith that doesn't just agree with God in good times, but clings to Him when nothing makes sense. And this is where God's strongest women are set apart. It's not that they don't suffer. No, we've already established that they often suffer more. It's that they stay grounded in faith when everything in them wants to run. Walking, they hold on, not because they feel strong, but because they know who God is, even when their emotions betray them. Faith, in its purest form, is not just belief that God exists, it's trust in His nature when circumstances scream the opposite. You see, trust and belief are not always the same. Belief can be intellectual, abstract. Trust is active, intimate, personal. And suffering exposes which one you actually have. When you're in the furnace, when the diagnosis comes, when the relationship ends, when the silence of heaven feels unbearable, that's when the depth of your faith is revealed. Spiritually speaking, there is a refining that happens in suffering, but there's also a choosing. You are constantly faced with a choice where you trust God here too. Not just when prayers are answered, but when they're met with delay, or worse, with what seems like divine silence. This choice to trust is not a one-time decision. It's daily. Sometimes it's minute by minute. And the women who walk closest with God are the ones who have chosen Him in their confusion, in their wariness, in their pain. Not because they always understood, but because they remembered who He was. Psychologically, this kind of trust rewires the soul. Research in the field of neuroscience shows us that repeated trust in the face of uncertainty builds a kind of inner fortitude. The mind learns how to regulate fear, how to quiet anxiety, how to rest even when outcomes are unknown. What's fascinating is that our brains respond to faith the same way they respond to safety. So when you trust God, truly trust Him, you're creating internal stability in an externally unstable world. And this is what gives God's strongest women such presence, such quiet authority. They carry peace into chaos. Walking, they are not exempt from the storm. They've just learned how to anchor themselves in it. Philosophically, the idea of faith in suffering forces us to grapple with the limits of human understanding. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, the moment when reason has gone as far as it can, and all that's left is the decision to trust. And in that leap, you don't deny the pain, you don't minimize the suffering, but you refuse to let it define the narrative. Faith is the bold declaration that there's more to the story than what you can see right now. It's a protest against despair. And this is the kind of faith that moves heaven, not the polished, performative kind that plays well in church. In the raw kind, the kind forged through tears and disappointment, the kind that says, even if He doesn't deliver me the way I want, I still know He's good. That's what sustains God's strongest women. That's what keeps them standing when others fall. But let's be honest, faith doesn't always feel heroic. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed when you don't want to. Sometimes it's saying one more prayer when your heart feels numb. Sometimes it's choosing to forgive, to keep going, to keep believing when bitterness would be easier. Don't mistake the quiet for weakness. Some of the most powerful acts of faith happen in private, far from applause, far from recognition. But God sees every single one. Walking, I want to remind you today that faith is not about pretending. It's about standing. You don't need to have all the answers. Walking, you just need to know the one who does. And you need to trust that even your unanswered questions are safe with him. That's what anchors your soul. That's what allows you to walk through fire and not be consumed. Walking. So if you're in a season where you feel like your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, I want you to hear this: silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. God is not ignoring you. He's inviting you to go deeper, to trust when it's not easy, to believe when you have every reason not to, because that kind of faith doesn't just survive suffering, it transforms it. And here's the truth I want to leave you with, walking. Faith isn't just your way through the storm, it's what God uses to reveal who you are in the storm. Let it hold you, let it shape you, walking. And most importantly, let it lead you into everything He's already prepared for you. A purpose is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, especially in spiritual conversations. But I want to take a moment and cut through the noise. Purpose is not a motivational slogan. It's not about chasing a dream or achieving success by the world's standards. In God's kingdom, purpose is revealed through process, and that process always includes pain. This is where many people misunderstand what God is doing. And they ask Him for purpose and then resist the very pressure that's designed to reveal it. God's strongest women suffer more not because they are forgotten or overlooked, but because their calling requires a deeper shaping. Purpose is not about comfort, it's about capacity. And God will not entrust you with influence if your character hasn't been tested. You see, as walking, suffering has a way of exposing both our weaknesses and our potential. It strips away what's superficial, it reveals what's lasting. And most importantly, it forces us to face the uncomfortable question, why am I here? That question, when asked in the middle of pain, is not a sign of doubt. It's a sign that you're being prepared for something bigger than yourself. Because real purpose isn't self-centered. It's not about personal achievement. It's about assignment, and assignments are discovered in the middle of hardship, not apart from it. Think about it this way: everything in creation has a purpose, but it only becomes functional when it is used. A sword is forged to cut, but before it can fulfill its purpose, it must be refined by fire. The fire doesn't give the sword its purpose. The fire reveals it, it tempers the blade, it strengthens the metal, it prepares the weapon for use. In the same way, the suffering you face doesn't give you value, it brings clarity. It calls forth the warrior in you that was already there, hidden beneath layers of comfort, fear, or limitation. Psychologically, this is deeply consistent with what we know about human development. In the field of logotherapy developed by Viktor Frankl, meaning is not something we wait to discover at the end of our suffering. As walking, meaning is something we create in the midst of it. Frankl argued that when people lose sight of meaning, they lose their will to live. But when they perceive even the slightest sense of purpose behind their pain, they gain strength to endure. This is exactly what happens in the lives of God's strongest women. The suffering itself becomes a vehicle not just for endurance, but for transformation. And through that transformation, a woman is prepared for her divine assignment. And let's be clear, divine purpose rarely looks like human ambition. You may not be called to a platform or a stage. You might not write a book or lead a ministry. But you might be called to raise a child who will. You might be called to carry a testimony that unlocks healing in someone else. You might be called to pray in secret and shift the spiritual atmosphere of an entire generation. Purpose is not always public, but it is always powerful. Philosophically, we have to wrestle with the idea that the very things we try to escape are the things that form us. It's in adversity that we become aware of our deeper longings, the eternal ache that reminds us we were made for more than temporary success. And C.S. once said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Why? Because pain demands attention. It wakes us up. It calls us out of complacency. and it positions us to ask the kinds of questions that open doors to revelation. So if you're walking through something right now, if it feels like your life has been marked by hardship more than victory, I want you to understand something very important as walking. You are not being punished. You are being positioned for clarity, positioned for impact, positioned for purpose. God wastes nothing. Walking, not a single tear, not a single setback. Every scar you carry has the potential to unlock freedom in someone else. That's how he works, King. He doesn't just heal you, he equips you to become a healer. The greatest tragedy is not suffering. The greatest tragedy is wasted suffering, pain that never gets converted into purpose because we refuse to see beyond it. But if you're willing to lean in, if you're willing to say, God, show me what you're doing in this, you will begin to see that your story is not just about survival, it's about assignment. And here's the truth I want you to walk away with. You are not suffering without reason. You are being refined for a purpose that reaches beyond you. And let your pain become the doorway to your assignment, and let your life testify that God never allows suffering without birthing something eternal through it. Walking. Let's talk about what happens after the suffering, not in some fairy tale sense where everything suddenly becomes easy and perfect, but in the deeper reality of what God does with a life that has been tested, refined, and transformed. You see, the journey of suffering is not just about survival, it's about becoming walking. And when a woman comes through the fire with her faith intact, her character sharpened, and her purpose awakened, something profound happens. She becomes a pillar, not a pillar in the sense of status or position, but in the truest, most powerful sense, a spiritual anchor, a stabilizing force in a world that's constantly shaking. God's strongest women emerge from their trials with more than just personal healing. They come out with authority that wasn't given to them by people, but authority that was forged through obedience, humility, and endurance. And it's this authority that becomes a lifeline for others of walking. What many people don't realize is that spiritual authority is deeply connected to suffering. You can't fake depth as walking. You can't manufacture real compassion. You can't teach wisdom that you haven't lived. And so when a woman has walked through the valleys, when she has battled through nights of silence and sorrow, when she has trusted God even when nothing made sense, that woman carries a presence. There's weight on her words. There's strength in her silence. There's peace in her eyes. She doesn't need to announce it. People feel it. Psychologically, this is a known phenomenon. Post-traumatic growth is a term used to describe how people who go through intense suffering often develop greater empathy, as walking, deeper appreciation for life, and stronger interpersonal relationships. They don't just recover, they emerge wiser. Walking. But for those who walk with God through that process, it goes even further. It's not just about emotional growth, it's spiritual formation. They've learned to draw from a well that others don't even know exists. And that's where their power lies, not in what they've escaped, but in what they've embraced. They didn't run from the refining process. They stayed. They allowed God to break what needed breaking and heal what needed healing. And now they carry the fruit of that surrender, not just for themselves, but for those around them. Because here's the deeper truth: your suffering wasn't just about you, King. It was never meant to end with your own deliverance. God's strongest women become vessels, conduits of healing, wisdom, King, and strength for others. And the more they give, the more they're filled. That's how the kingdom works. What you receive in the secret place, you're meant to release in the open. What God poured into you in private through tears and fire and silence, He will now use to pour into others who are still in the thick of their own struggle. Philosophically, this aligns with a higher view of purpose, one that transcends self-fulfillment and moves into sacrificial impact. In Greek thought, there was a concept called telos, the idea of a thing reaching its ultimate purpose or end. For human beings, telos was never just about personal happiness. It was about fulfillment through becoming who you were made to be for the sake of others. And this is exactly what happens when a woman of God emerges from suffering with clarity and strength. She doesn't hoard what she's received. She gives. She becomes the one who intercedes when others are too tired to pray. Walking, she becomes the one who speaks truth when others are trapped in lies. She becomes the one who walks into rooms and brings the atmosphere of heaven with her. You may not realize it yet, but every trial you've walked through has been preparing you to be this kind of woman, a woman who doesn't crumble when the world shakes as walking, a woman who can carry others when they can't carry themselves, a woman who can be trusted with influence, not because she's perfect walking, but because she's been proven. And now God is inviting you to step into that role, not in pride, but in quiet confidence. Walking, not to draw attention to yourself, but to serve as a living testimony of what He can do with a surrendered life. So if you've ever wondered why the battle has been so intense, why the warfare so prolonged, understand this. The weight of your calling required the depth of your preparation. You weren't just being protected, you were being built. Built to carry glory. Built to stand when others fall. Built to become a refuge, a wellspring, a light in dark places.